There is a moment that happens to almost everyone who grows, and almost nobody talks about it. Not the moment you change, the moment right after. The moment someone you love looks at you differently. Just for a second, like they are trying to recognize a stranger wearing a familiar face. You did not become cruel. You did not become dangerous. You simply stopped being predictable. And predictability, more than love, more than loyalty, more than blood, is what most relationships are actually built on. At first, you assume you are imagining it. The slight pause before they respond. The joke that used to land and now falls flat. The compliment that arrives with a strange edge underneath it. You tell yourself it is nothing, but your body already knows what your mind has not caught up to yet. Because change does not just happen inside you, it travels outward. It touches every person who built their sense of safety around the old version of you. And most people are not equipped to watch someone they know become someone new. Carl Jung spent decades studying why this happens, and his answer was more unsettling than most people expect. He believed that human relationships are rarely built on who two people actually are. They are built on roles, unspoken, unnegotiated, invisible roles that both people agree to play the moment they decide to stay close. The stabilizer and the one who needs stabilizing. The listener and the one who needs to be heard. The strong one and the one who is allowed to be weak. Nobody sits down and assigns these roles out loud. They form silently, over years, through 1,000 small moments where one person adjusted and the other did not have to. And once a role is set, it becomes load-bearing. Entire friendships, marriages, and families are built on top of it, which means the moment you change your role, even slightly, even for good reasons, something structural shifts underneath everyone standing near you. This is why growth so rarely feels like celebration. It feels like earthquake. You stop apologizing for things that were never your fault. You stop absorbing blame that was never yours to carry. You stop shrinking your voice to keep a room comfortable. And the people who built their comfort on your smallness feel the floor move, not because you attacked them, because you stopped playing a part they never realized was a part. Jung called the mechanism behind this projection, but the deeper truth is more specific than that word usually gets used for. People do not just project their fears onto you, they project their dependence onto you. The friend who always needed someone to rescue them built their identity around being rescued. When you stop rescuing, you are not being unkind. You are removing the stage they perform their identity on, and people will resist losing their stage long before they will admit they were ever performing on one. This is where the discomfort begins to show itself in small, deniable ways. A slightly colder tone, a joke about how you have changed, a comment about how you used to be more fun, more relaxed, easier to talk to. Notice the language, easier, not happier, not healthier, easier. Because what people often mourn when you grow is not you. It is the effort they no longer have to spend managing the old version of you. The old you required less honesty from them. The old you absorbed more, argued less, needed less, noticed less. The new you is a mirror they did not sign up to look into. And nobody enjoys being confronted with a mirror when they were not prepared to see themselves in it. This is the part almost nobody says directly. So let's say it directly. Some people do not want you to heal, not because they are evil. Because your healing exposes patterns they have not been ready to face in themselves. If you stop tolerating disrespect, the person who has been mildly disrespecting you for years now has to either change their behavior or confront the fact that they were never respecting you in the first place. Most people will choose a third option. They will simply try to pull you back, not through open conflict, through subtle emotional gravity. They will bring up old jokes you have outgrown, old insecurities you no longer carry, old versions of arguments you have already resolved inside yourself. Not maliciously, instinctively, because unconsciously, the nervous system of every person around you learned to predict you. And prediction to the human brain, feels safer than truth. This is why even loving families can quietly resist a person's growth. A parent may not consciously want their child to stay small, but if the family system was built around one person being the difficult one, and that person stops being difficult, the entire emotional architecture of the family has to reorganize. And reorganizing is uncomfortable even when it leads somewhere healthier. So people resist, not the person, the disruption. Jung believed that most people go their entire lives mistaking the psychological role they were assigned for their actual identity. The peacekeeper believes peace is who they are. The caretaker believes caretaking is who they are. The invisible one believes invisibility is who they are. When you change your role, you are not just changing your behavior. You are threatening their entire theory of who they are, because your role and their role were built to fit together like two pieces of the same puzzle. Reorm one piece, and the other piece has no shape anymore. This is why transformation is rarely met with applause from everyone. Some people will genuinely celebrate your growth, but watch closely, and you will notice something strange. The support often has a ceiling. They cheer for the version of your growth that does not require anything from them. They love that you started setting boundaries with other people. They are far less enthusiastic when those boundaries start applying to them. They love that you stopped being so anxious. Until your calm starts exposing how chaotic they still are, they love your confidence. Until your confidence stops needing their approval to exist. This is not always conscious sabotage. Most of the time, it is something quieter and sadder. It is grief. People are grieving a version of you that made them feel needed. And grief, even disguised as irritation, still deserves to be understood even when it is not your job to manage it. Here is where Jung's framework becomes genuinely useful instead of just poetic. He believed that the psyche is always seeking equilibrium, not just inside one person, but inside every relationship that person is part of. When one person changes, the system briefly loses equilibrium, and systems do not like losing equilibrium. So the system fights to restore its old balance, often by unconsciously pressuring the person who changed to change back. This explains something almost everyone has felt, but rarely has language for. Why the people who love you the most are sometimes the first to make you feel guilty for growing. It is not always because they want you to fail. It is because your growth is the only variable in the system they can actually influence. They cannot control the world. They cannot control their own unresolved wounds. But if they can pull you back toward the version of you they understood, the system feels stable again. Even if that stability is built on your shrinking. This is the moment many people quietly abandon their own growth. Not because the growth was wrong, because the discomfort of disappointing people they love feels heavier than the discomfort of disappointing themselves. And so they retreat. They soften the boundary. They laugh at the joke that used to hurt. They let the old dynamic slide back into place. And for a while, everyone feels better. Except the part of them that already tasted who they were becoming. That part does not forget. It waits. Jung wrote extensively about what happens to the parts of ourselves we repeatedly abandon to keep others comfortable. He believed they do not disappear, they compress. And compressed things do not stay quiet forever. This is why so many people experience sudden, seemingly irrational bursts of resentment toward people they claim to love. It rarely starts that day. It usually starts years earlier. In every small moment they chose harmony over honesty. So if you are the one changing right now, here is the part that matters most. The discomfort you are sensing in the people around you is not proof that you are doing something wrong. It is often proof that you are doing something real. Real change disturbs systems built on unconscious agreement. Fake change, the kind that never threatens anyone, rarely gets noticed at all. Nobody flinches when you make a surface-level improvement. People flinch when the improvement reaches somewhere structural, when it touches the role they depended on you to play. This does not mean every uncomfortable reaction is a red flag. Some discomfort is simply adjustment. People who love you can feel destabilized by your growth, and still, eventually, meet you in the new place you are standing. The distinction is not whether they feel discomfort. Almost everyone will. The distinction is what they do with it. Some people feel the discomfort and ask themselves, what does this change say about me? And they use it to grow alongside you. Others feel the discomfort and immediately look for a way to make the discomfort your fault instead. The sarcasm, the subtle guilt, the accusation that you have become different, said like an insult instead of an observation. This is where you start to see who was actually attached to you and who was attached to the function you served. It is a brutal distinction to make. But it is also, strangely, one of the most clarifying experiences a person can go through, because once you see it, you cannot fully unsee it. You start noticing which relationships require your smallness to survive. You start noticing how certain conversations only feel comfortable when you are performing an older, quieter version of yourself. You start noticing the specific tone some people use right before they try to talk you out of your own growth, disguised as concern. Are you sure you're not overreacting? You used to be so much more relaxed about this. I just don't want you to lose yourself. Listen closely to that last one. Lose yourself, as if the self they are afraid of you losing was ever fully yours to begin with. And not simply the version of you that made their life easier. This is not an argument for cutting everyone off the moment they react imperfectly to your growth. People are allowed to have complicated reactions to change, so are you. But there is a difference between someone adjusting and someone quietly working to keep you smaller. One deserves patience, the other deserves boundaries. And learning to tell the difference is one of the most psychologically mature skills a person can develop. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you actually are, instead of who you were conditioned to be, is not a peaceful linear unfolding. It is closer to a controlled demolition. Old structures come down. Some relationships survive the demolition and rebuild into something more honest. Others cannot survive it, because they were never built on anything solid enough to withstand honesty in the first place. Neither outcome makes you the villain of the story. It simply reveals what the relationship was actually made of. Here is the part that quietly reframes everything. The discomfort other people feel around your growth is not a debt you owe them. You did not sign a contract promising to stay legible to everyone forever. You did not agree at any point in your life to remain permanently convenient so that other people would never have to examine themselves. The uncomfortable truth is this: growth is not supposed to feel universally welcomed. If everyone around you claps easily for every version of your evolution, it may be worth asking whether the evolution ever asked anything real of them. Because the versions of growth that matter most almost always cost you something socially before they give you anything back. They cost you the friend who only knew how to relate to your old anxiety. They cost you the family member who liked being the strong one in every room you shared. They cost you the partner who mistook your silence for peace. This is not a punishment. It is the price of becoming someone who can no longer be quietly managed. And here's where Jung's ideas stop sounding like abstract theory and start sounding disturbingly personal. The people most unsettled by your transformation are very often mirrors of the parts of yourself you are only now beginning to leave behind. The friend who resents your boundaries may be reflecting the version of you that once had none. The family member who mocks your calm may be reflecting the anxiety you are finally learning to release. Watching someone else struggle to accept your growth can, if you let it, become a strange kind of teacher, not because their reaction is right, but because it shows you, in real time, exactly how much energy it once took you to stay who you used to be. And once you see that clearly, something shifts permanently. You stop needing everyone to understand your growth in order to trust that it is real. You stop translating your boundaries into apologies. You stop explaining your peace to people who only ever respected your chaos. This is not coldness. It is what happens when a person finally stops outsourcing their sense of self to rooms that were never built to hold who they were becoming. Somewhere in this process, a quieter realization tends to surface. You begin to understand that discomfort in other people is not always a signal to stop. Sometimes it is simply the sound of a system adjusting to something true. And truth, more often than people admit, rearranges the room before it ever settles into peace. Jung's deepest insight was never really about masks or shadows or the unconscious in isolation. It was about relationship, about how much of what we call identity is actually negotiated, silently, between people long before either person consciously agrees to the terms. And the moment you stop honoring terms you never actually chose, some people will call it change. Others will call it becoming someone they no longer recognize. But there is a third possibility. Neither of them will say out loud. Maybe you are simply becoming someone they can no longer predict. And in a world where most relationships run on unspoken predictability, that alone is enough to make people uncomfortable. Not because you did something wrong, because for the first time, they are meeting you instead of the role you used to play. If this made you think of someone whose discomfort suddenly makes more sense, or a version of yourself you finally see clearly, leave a comment with the moment the floor shifted.